anymore. I was actually crossing through, and I went into this massive area that looked like a desert. And I remember that I was looking down and I could see that there were these people. There was this old gentleman, and he was very decrepit. He looked like he hadn't eaten. He was impoverished, and he was looking at me, and he had his hand sticking out. And when he looked at me, I realized that he wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me. And when I turned around, I saw this enormous light. It was beautiful. It was like easily 10 times bigger than the sun. And I remember thinking, why isn't this light hurting me? Why am I able to see right into it? It wasn't burning my eyes or anything. And when I turned back, that man became this little boy. Same situation. And he was reaching out. And when again, I looked back, and this time the light was right on top of me. And when it got really close to me, I could feel every cell in my body vibrating. It was really unique, because when I tell this part of the story, I really want people to understand that it wasn't like I was feeling every bit of my body vibrating as a whole. I was experiencing it as if I were every little cell in my body. I could experience it as if I was the cell thirsty for this light. It was such an enormous, beautiful, enrapturing light. There's no words to really describe. And I know that other people have talked about this, but there's just no words to describe the feeling that you get when it starts to go through you. It literally takes over. The entire essence of your soul becomes this light. And when I got into the light, I remember being greeted by a couple of silhouette images. It became really clear to me that the light wasn't just this big light. It was like I could sense all of these individual entities that I would equate to as like family members. They didn't have a face. They didn't have really defined characteristics of a body. They were more like silhouette lights. And I remember that I knew who they were. I knew that I had experienced my whole eternity with these people, with these beings, and they knew me too. And I remember that one of them came up to me and hugged me. And when they hugged me, or when it hugged me, the other ones hugged me as well. And my whole body exploded. It wasn't though I had a body, like a physical body, but my body was etheric. It was very translucent. And it just completely exploded into the only way I could describe it is, at that moment, I became fully aware of what it was like to be one with everything. And at that precise moment, I was looking around in this orb, and I saw just this infinite stream of lights. And those infinite streams of light were actually individual, what I now know as supreme beings. And it went on forever. I mean, I just stood there, and it went on forever. And the crazy thing is that I felt like I knew them all, and they knew me. And I remember at one point, and I don't always talk about this, but I do now, because it's become very essential in the way that I view life now. I remember being in this moment, and this moment lasted for a long time. This reunion, I call it, was there for quite a bit, and I didn't want to leave. There was no way I wanted to leave. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. And so this entity, there was this sense of another presence around me. And this presence kept insisting that I become more cognizant, more aware of what I was experiencing. And it kept telling me, what do you see? And I looked around, and I'd be honest, at first I didn't even care to see anything. It wasn't visually seeing nothing. You don't see things with your eyes. You feel things is the best way to describe it. And I remember that it became so insistent that I looked around, and it was at that point when I realized that what I was being surrounded by was all of these individual beings that had actually come together as a collective to form this bigger light. In other words, at that moment, by the way, at that moment, I moved, this thing that was around me grabbed me. It felt like it grabbed me, even though there wasn't really a hand there, and it whisked me back. And I all of a sudden went through this tunnel, beautiful lights. it was like full of lights. And then on the outside of those lights, you could see celestial bodies. And then I landed back in my body. The odd thing was is that I landed back in my body 15 years later. So I was experiencing this moment as if it were real time, but I was actually, in a linear sense, experiencing it much later in time. But what I saw and what they wanted me to see was that this enormous light that people talk about, this thing that we relate to as God, typically, it wasn't that this thing created itself and then created us individually as an expression of itself, which is the way that we've been told, if we're even told that. Because most of the time we're not even told that. We're told that we're disconnected from everything, especially from God. We start out life behind the 8 ball, so to speak. But that this being was actually created because of a collectiveness that came together, individual supreme beings that came together collectively to form this thing we now call God. And that just changed the narrative of my life tremendously, because here I was throughout my life thinking that I was basically this insignificant little thing of a being, and then being shown that we are all supreme beings, that we all came together to create the oneness that we call God. So anyway, I came back into my body. I had these images and these dreams for weeks, months.